Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Shaping Africa podcast. Today I'm joined by Georgie Ndirangu. Georgie has worked at almost every marquee journalism firm on the continent. He's worked at Forbes, CNBC, and BBC. And I'm so happy to have you on the show today. I think you're someone who a lot of people can look up to, not only because of your remarkable career, but the pivots thereof.
Not my fantastic personality.
Well, that as well.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very charming.
Thanks for having me.
So welcome to the show. So I thought, we would talk about your life in kind of three main buckets. Mm-hmm. One is your career so far. Mm-hmm. Two is, how you see the journalism and media industry. And three is really about how you see the continent and the role that you're playing. So maybe we can start by talking a little bit about your career.
Yeah.
How did you end up, kind of where you are today?
So where I am now, I'm a consultant at a company called Portland. So it's a UK company with clients, and the market that they service is Africa, UK, Middle East, Span-Asia, and the US. So we handle some clients with strategic reasoning and communication, and then PR, press releases, you name it, anything that goes within that world. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was BBC, so a lot of in front of camera, a lot of on-ground reports and interviews, just traveling the world, showcasing what's happening outside Africa. So showing Africa to the world and the world to Africa. Mm-hmm. And then before that, it was CNBC. So CNBC was a lot of maths and economics and business news. So during that time, it was Forbes Woman and Forbes Africa, right, just highlighting some exemplary people. So for Forbes Woman, it was most of the women doing amazing stuff on the continent. And then, before that, it was in Kenya, a lot of math. I always tell my friends as a joke, but when we were at the Ministry of Land, so it was Lands and Housing back then, we used to make checks, like the checks that people use within the ministry. We were the ones sitting doing, okay, it has to go 0100464. If you look away and it goes 466 instead of 465, they call you from the central bank, stuff like that. Yeah. So I think accounting was very interesting back then, but life had to happen. Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up, kind of transitioning from actuarial sciences, math, and that sphere into journalism?
I think I cannot stress enough how much we've talked about this. I love it so much because it's a friend of mine who used to do fashion and like a fashion page back in the day. Back when we were all trying to learn Facebook. And we all used to camp at a cyber cafe, paying 120 shillings to just showcase ourselves on Facebook. Mm-hmm. At that time, we had a fashion outfit, and the guy who set it up had left for Rwanda maybe a year before me. Scoped the place. He's a huge hustler. He had met some guys who worked at a TV station, and then he came back and said, you know what, we need to have a team. So I thought it would just be one of those where you go for a month and then come back. 7-8 years later, we were still in Kigali, So it was. It started as in radio, because I think the company that he was tied to, they went now into radio, and they needed more English speakers on radio, entertainment guys to do entertainment. So the fashion helped. My background in actuarial didn't help at that point. Right. And so now radio, the guy got a loan, and then he opened a TV, the first private TV in Rwanda. Okay. And at that time, I think is when the country was, they wanted to have an Anglophone presence and an Anglophone speaking population. Mm-hmm. So Francophone, French was moving lower down the priority list in terms of speaking. And then so English made sense. And then the government rallied behind it because they wanted a lot of private sector players. So that's what happened. So when the TV was opened, of course, cheap labor, you're already in the company and you won't negotiate much. We were added maybe like 5,000 shillings. We weren't earning much. It was like 150,000 Rwandan francs, which is maybe like 23,000 on radio. And then when we moved to TV, they said, you know what, we'll bump up your salary. 170,000, so 30k, something like that. Right. So it worked well within what we had hoped at the time, but we didn't know what the industry norm was, so things like that. So TV10 happened. We were on the prime. Within no time, we were on the prime primetime news, 8 p.m., which is 9 p.m. here. And it honestly just moved up from there. One of the things that I don't normally mention most of the time is that I owe Rwanda a lot. One, because when we were in, maybe like now for that private TV, anytime we had big news, the government would make sure maybe the minister comes to your news or like they come for interviews. So that in itself means the government is making sure you meet high profile people. So when you come to a client and tell them, I've interviewed the minister, they're already like, oh, okay. So that's now how the moderating happened. Yeah, so then it just moved to CNBC and BBC.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. And so did journalism, was it a natural fit for you, or you were just kind of going with the flow?
I think I don't think there's a Kenyan who can ever tell you. It's like whenever people applying for jobs, they just see any job, vacancy for, they just open it and click apply. Like most of the time, you don't even read what the qualifications are. You'll find out much later. Kenyans have that knack for, just trying anything and everything. And also we chat a lot. We're taught English so well in school.
True.
So I think journalism at that time, it was more of on-the-job training. Of course, we got the formal training after. Even with BBC, we got the training and understanding how cameras work, microphones, sound editing. But before then, nothing. Yeah. I really did not think I'd get into journalism. Yeah, I felt like it was a very misunderstood space, and most of the people that did it were really good at it. So you had to go through series of, like being trained and this, because the people that we knew back then, to name some of Kenya's Kachin Kasavuli, all this, they were so good that you getting into that space felt like you were intruding in someone else's domain. But yeah, I guess you never know until you try.
True,
yeah.
True. So what came after TV10?
CNBC came after.
Okay.
So the main representative, so CNBC, how CNBC has mapped itself is that they've bought the license. So from the big CNBC in the States, everyone who wants to operate CNBC within their markets has to buy a license. So it's the most expensive thing that they pay for aside from taxes. So what that meant is you have to make money yourself. The main CNBC will not pay your salaries. So meaning they need to be in a space where they're making money. Rwanda at the time was really supporting private sector players, and they were just putting a lot of money behind that. And that's what happened with CNBC. So CNBC approached them and said they wanted to set up a headquarters in East Africa. They already had an office in Kenya, but I think the money was not sufficient. So they needed a place where they had extreme support, proper governance, and then the money streaming in. Kigali, perfect fit. So that was one. Two, the guy who was the main presenter, reporter, he used to be one of these gym guys. He's called Kezio Musokes. Now he's a good friend of mine, but before then he didn't understand because he used to be in the gym, so he messed his back once, was out of the job. Second time he messed his back, he couldn't come back to work. So there was a vacancy.
Right.
Yeah, and then they applied, they put out the job, and poor Kezio, we took his job. We joke about it much later, but it wasn't a joking matter back then. So now I was the main reporter. We were only 3 of us, and then now they came and set up a whole outfit, 2 big studios in Kigali, and then we just grew with the CNBC from there.
Amazing. Yeah. And so looking back on your journey up to that point, what advice would you give to a young kid who's in uni at the moment? Probably going through a course which they don't know if they'll apply, or maybe interning in the Ministry of Lands doing menial tasks. What advice would you give to that person?
I would say there's so much out there so most of the time, even based on the circles that we're in, we're so focused on just that. But there's so much happening out there and there are people always looking for either people that don't know what they're doing or people that have the talent. You name it. There's always a million opportunities. The only problem is we're so stuck in something that's most comfortable for us, because applying for stuff, cover letters, I saw guys on Twitter complaining that they wish cover letters were not a thing anymore. But writing a cover letter is cumbersome, looking for these jobs or active emails are cumbersome. But just apply to a million places. I mean, the possibility of getting one in 100 is very high. So just just put yourself out there. You never know what the world gives back.
Yeah. That's actually very true.
Yeah.
Having the resilience and fortitude to actually do all that applying.
Yeah, and maintaining heartache, because it's painful being told no. At BBC, we got it so many times. Like, I think maybe 11 times. I was rejected 11 times.
What?
Before, yeah, you get those regret emails. You're like, okay.
Really?
Yeah, because BBC was up there. You know, BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, we all knew them as those companies, you know. And then, yeah, so you apply, you're told, nah. Apply, nah. So you keep wondering, like, what's up? And then you just keep doing. And then when it happened, you're like, okay. So now it's always telling guys, just apply. I mean, a no is just a no. They don't know you. They just know your application.
Yeah. And what was that moment like when you got the BBC offer?
I think we couldn't see it coming, first of all. But I had seen, so my boss was Larry Mado, he used to work here. So now it's with the CNN. But he had come, he was my friend before when he worked at a national TV station here. He had come to Kigali when I was moderating a session with some like key stakeholders, and he sat in the room as he watched like conversations with presidents, whatever happening. And I think that's the time when he was like, all right, we might, but he didn't tell me. At that point, he didn't even tell me. He said, you know, we might be showcasing some jobs. So when I applied, rejection. Then this one time he calls, and I think he wanted to call like one of my other friends who had gotten the job. So when I saw him calling, I was like, oh, here we go. Then he picks up the phone. He says, hi, Maggie. I said, Maggie? It's Georgie. Oh, okay. Then he asked me, how do you think the interview went? I'm like, I guess it was okay. Then I remember I was at the petrol station. And then, so I had just parked where they were fueling the car. Then the guy, then he says, oh, okay. We'd like to see you in Nairobi on. I say, wow, yeah, you got the job. I told the guy, where just after? Just wake up, full tank. You have no money, but you're like, just wake up or whatever. Just receive some news. Then I drove around. I didn't even know what I was doing. I drove around Rwanda. I drove around. Then I told now my ma and my family. Then a few weeks later,
I was in Nairobi.
I was in Nairobi. We cried with my CNBC family, like literally, and then we had to come to Nairobi now.
Yeah. Okay. And then more recently, you made a switch.
Yeah.
Obviously to Portland.
Yeah.
Like, what were the ingredients of that pivot, and how did you start thinking about transitioning from the BBC to Portland? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not gonna lie. I say, oh, like it was a big epiphany. I woke up and the burning bush. Nah. It was. I think around 2020, I started to feel some fatigue, especially because when you're at an organization such as the BBC, because of policy, you can't do much outside. So you can't partner with brands. You just do your work, finish, go home. Because, I mean, conflict of interest most of the time. So with that, as different clients come on board and they tell you, can you work with us? You're just like, no. And the money that they're offering you is twice your salary made in 1 hour. You see what I mean? Like to sit and moderate a panel or to influence for something, just anything to whatever level is commensurate to whatever they pay you for a month. So after a while, even with some of the guys and my mentors that we were talking with, they were like, actually, I think there's a very high possibility that you're missing out on such a big niche that because you're so focused on still being at the Beeb and being known as the BBC guy. You know, we're so stuck on titles so much that we feel like that's all we have, to a point where you didn't even want to be called Georgie. You wanted to be called BBC's Georgie, such that if BBC is not there, you're not a person on your own. You know, so. I think that imposter syndrome as well, just like I needed it to fade away. So I started getting serious depression, serious mental.
Really?
I was not okay. For a very long time. And the worst thing is, most of the time that's happening, people are just behind you telling, oh, you're doing so well. And then when you go back home, you're like,
the weight of it.
Yeah, the weight of it is so much because you know you're not where you want to be. And then so I decided to apply for school, but then COVID hit. Right around, so it was around that time I had applied before, and then COVID hit, and then that meant like you had to delay school. So I was gonna leave the country, go to Canada, study there. But for me, it wasn't going to study; it was running away, right? Like, so leaving Kenya, leaving BBC, leaving whatever, going and restarting, because I had done it when I went to Kigali. So I was like, what's going to happen? I'm not married. I don't have kids yet. I don't have a family. So I'd probably go start a family, or I'd go do stuff and then come start a family. So that happened. And then I remember maybe just around July, August last year, the visa came for school, and then a job offer came at the same time that was outside BBC. So it was one of those where you decided to pick the job, but I told the guys at the workplace, so I'm going to pick this, but there's an offer to go to school, because the visa had come, and most times you never get the visa. It's tough to get it.
Especially in COVID times.
I know, yeah, that was last year. So, and then, when we sat with my new boss, who was now the one onboarding me or interviewing me, she told me the clients I'd be handling and what kind of work I'd be doing. I said, you know what, I could always go to Canada on holiday, you know? Yeah, then that's how it happened. That's how we just shifted. But it had to be forced out, yeah, because I resigned and I didn't know what I was going to do.
Really?
Yeah, I resigned from the BBC maybe like 2 weeks before the other job offer came.
Okay.
And I didn't know how my life would be.
Can you just dial back? Because I think most people maybe look at your life and they're like, Forbes, CNBC, BBC.
Yeah.
And they don't know about that period where you were like...
Not okay.
Not okay.
Yeah.
So how did you work through that? Like, how did you, first of all, keep going through that, and then figure out your next steps? Because I think there's a lot of people, I've been there myself, it's not pretty, where you're like, what am I doing with my life? Yeah. So what did you do? Like, how did you get through that?
So first things first, you have to have a very hot shower where you cry.
Yeah.
You just cry.
The ugly cry helps.
The ugly cry.
It happened in my mom's kitchen.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. It was just like...
Just let it all, just let it all go. And then support system. A support system is very crucial, because you always at any one point need to know that you're not the problem.
True.
Right? Like, it's circumstances and things that have maybe disappointed you. I'm a firm believer in prayer, but at some point you're like, dear God, are you on holiday? Because what's happening? Yeah, like, you know? So there's that, and just, I think, you know, like sometimes when people ask you, what's your love language? And you say, I don't want to say words of affirmation because that's narcissistic. But it is when people tell you, I feel like where you are, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. So that, in a way, keeps you going, because you're like, all right, if I stop doing this, there's maybe one or two people that would also feel let down, your family excluded. So I think it was just that, like a lot of people constantly saying, like asking you, I'm in this place in my life, what do I do? In your mind, you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing with mine, you know? Right. So I think it was just that, a mix of all of that, a lot of prayer and like a proper support system. Yeah, and pastries. Yeah, a lot of that, a lot,
Yeah, like Grenier, huh?
Like Grenier, exactly.
To see the BBC folks come in, I'm like, ooh.
Use half of your salary there and then complain that you're not paid enough.
You should get La Grenier to sponsor this episode.
Exactly.